Good evening and thank you for joining us. The Thunder Bay Fire Service could be in for some major changes.
They'll come if recommendations contained in a new consultant's report are adopted by Thunder Bay City Council. Among the moves under consideration, the closure of one of the city's older fire stations. Tyler Kelleher has more.
The consultant's report that will be presented to City Council on Monday night recommends sweeping changes for Thunder Bay Fire Rescue. Amongst them is the closure of an older fire station and bringing the services administration under one roof.
The consultant will be presenting the draft report to council. It's for their information and it's an opportunity for council to provide some feedback.
Barrie-based firm Emergency Management Incorporated was tasked with developing the new strategic plan. Among changes, consultant Lyle Kwan suggests decommissioning fire rescue headquarters on Vickers Street and moving staff to the Water Street station. Contacted by telephone, Kwan says upgrades to the Vickers Street building would cost upwards of $1 million, and due to the age of the structure, it could be in the department's best interest to tear it down for a new, smaller fire hall, which would cost about $2 million to build.
This is a long-term plan. It's a plan that's envisioned to cover about 10 years or so. And so we will be working on the recommendations set out in this plan for the years to come.
Once council evaluates the draft, Kwan will finalize the report for approval in February. Other options include combining both Vickers and Water fire halls into one station at a location nearby to the Balmoral Police Station. Those recommendations are among 20 in the document, which is aimed toward reducing costs without impeding service. Tyler Kelleher, TBT News.
All of the evidence has now been presented in the Keith and Marissa Hobbs and Mary Voss extortion trial. Cross-examination of the former mayor wrapped up today. Crown attorney Peter Keene challenged Hobbs' version of a number of key points in the case. Ryan Benazzo explains.
All of the evidence has been presented, and all that remains are closing submissions. Cross-examination of former Mayor Keith Hobbs concluded on day 13, a day after Crown Attorney Peter Keene suggested it was absurd for Keith and Marissa Hobbs to continue to associate with the alleged victim despite his pattern of bizarre and inappropriate behavior. On Thursday, Keene pointed to a series of seemingly panicked text messages from the alleged victim that came after a November 16, 2016 meeting between the victim and the Hobbses. The Crown contends this was the meeting during which the alleged victim was first made aware of the incriminating video evidence against him. The victim sent several texts to Marissa Hobbs after that meeting, saying that Mary Voss must sign an agreement now, that it's, quote, too hot to wait. Throughout, Hobbs has maintained the victim had already agreed to buy Voss a $265,000 home before they entered the picture. Voss, however, didn't want that house, and Keith Hobbs says he was simply trying to help broker an amicable deal for both sides, at one point suggesting the alleged victim give Voss the cash equivalent for that home and that she could take out a mortgage to cover the rest of a $429,000 property she was interested in. But that's seemingly contradicted by another text from the victim. He tells Marissa Hobbs that he'll agree to buy the more expensive house, but, quote, Mary has to pay with me. To which Marissa Hobbs replies, pay? ? As for the eventual purchase agreement for the more expensive home in exchange for all incriminating evidence against the victim, Hobbs says he drafted that only to have further evidence that the alleged victim was, quote, trying to buy his way out of the situation. Keene countered by saying Hobbs was already in possession of incontrovertible video evidence of the alleged victim's crime and that Hobbs should have gone to police right then and there. There's been another scheduling change regarding closing submissions. It was originally thought that those wouldn't take place until February. Now, however, it's unclear when those submissions will be made. The court will decide that on Friday morning. Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
Even though it opened its doors just over a year ago, the overdose prevention site at the Norwest Community Health Center is already expanding. Extended hours and a facelift were at the center of today's announcement for the overdose prevention site on Simpson Street. Up until now, the site is run from 10 in the morning until 6 in the evening, Monday through Friday. Under the new plan, it will also be open now on Saturdays.
Regards to individuals who are injecting, having access to services with a nurse under supervision is really important. We know that the number of overdoses in our community and the demand that it's taking for individuals to respond, whether that's family or our emergency medical services, that we're hoping to reduce that burden.
The site also hopes to expand services to 7 days a week in the new year. To go along with the new hours, a new logo has been unveiled in the hopes that it will help clients better understand what the Northwest Community Health Center is trying to accomplish.
A Thunder Bay MPP push for improvements to the Northern Health Travel Grant was up for debate at Queen's Park today. Thunder Bay Atikokan NDP Judith Monteith Farrell saw her first private member's bill pass second reading this afternoon. The legislation would create a committee to review the program, which subsidizes costs for those traveling over 100 kilometers for specialized medical treatment. Monteith Farrell says the program doesn't cover enough and often leaves people waiting too long for reimbursement. Kenora Rainy River MPP Greg Rickford says he's generally supportive of the bill.
Travel costs have risen considerably over the years, yet the amount covered has not gone up enough. People receive much less than the amount they spend.
There are majority elements of this private member's bill that I appreciate very much and generally support.
Rickford's colleague Robin Martin, the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Health, says some of the issues raised with the program are already being addressed by her government. The bill's fate will be decided on third reading after committee review.
Meantime, the Ford government was on the defensive at Queen's Park today following yesterday's report from the provincial auditor. Bonnie Lysyk called into question the Conservatives' ability to meet their carbon reduction targets. That prompted criticism from the opposition over the Conservatives' commitment to combat climate change, but the government says its targets are achievable. Colin DeMello reports.
We will be saying that, more work needs to be done.
The day after Ontario's Auditor General delivered a blunt assessment of the Ford government's climate change plan, the Environment Minister is offering reassurances.
I'll tell the legislature right now, we will obtain our targets of 30% by 2030 in order to meet our agreement with the Paris Agreement.
But the government's strategy to reduce Ontario's greenhouse gas emissions is being criticized as being unrealistic. The auditor noted yesterday that under the Progressive Conservative plan, this province isn't likely to achieve its targets.
We found that the initiatives identified in the plan by the ministry that could further reduce greenhouse gas emissions are not yet supported by sound evidence on how the anticipated reductions will be achieved.
The report also found that the government may be exaggerating its ability to achieve its targets. Its climate change projections, the auditor says, used environmental programs that the Ford government cancelled, which therefore won't have an impact on reducing harmful emissions.
Yet the Ford government somehow managed to count both of these cancelled initiatives towards their greenhouse gas reduction goals. Was this incompetence or was this ignoring reality?
Listen, the Auditor General also said the climate change plan that was put out is an estimate of what the emissions are today and what will be the reductions. And we're saying that more work needs to be done to develop the ways in which emissions can be reduced further.
The government also acknowledged its plan is still in the draft stages, but has not given any firm timeline for when it'll become reality. Colin DeMello, CTV News.
On the education front, the clock is now ticking for the English Catholic school teachers to begin a legal strike position. The Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association, or OECTA, has received a no board report, meaning they could legally strike as soon as Saturday, December 21st. The union accused the Ford government of not treating publicly funded education with the respect it deserves as contract talks stall, but the education minister says a deal is still possible.
A quick arrest for Thunder Bay Police following an armed robbery at a North Side residence. Officers were called to a Ravenwood Avenue home just after 1 o'clock Wednesday morning when a resident found an armed man in their basement. The thief then pointed a firearm at the victim before fleeing the residence, escaping on a bicycle. That bicycle was later found abandoned on North Cumberland Street and officers were able to apprehend a suspect in the same area a short time later. A 34-year-old city man is facing break-and-enter and weapons charges.
Thunder Bay firefighters responded to a garage fire in the East End yesterday afternoon. A blaze was reported around 3:30 in the rear laneway of the 800 block on McMillan Street. Arriving crews absorbed heavy smoke and flame coming from the garage and called for additional units. Firefighters also had to contend with 2 large propane tanks beside the garage, one of which ignited. Responders were able to quickly knock down the fire, preventing it from spreading to the garage interior or adjacent buildings. No injuries were reported, and the cause of the fire is under investigation.
The M&R and the group representing forest companies are defending their management of timber harvesting in the wake of a critical report from an environmental group. Yesterday, the Wildlands League said its study of 20 and 30-year-old clear cuts in the forest north and west of Lake Nipigon still had logging scars covering around 14% of harvested areas. The deforestation is caused by logging roads, landings, slash piles, and chipper piles left behind, and it said these barren areas have been significantly underestimated. The M&R responded today, saying their latest survey showed just 9% of the harvested areas are left unproductive, and they say companies are required to make progress in recovering those areas for new tree growth. The Forest Products Association of Canada calls the Wildlands report wildly misleading. It says the study is purposely exaggerated and focuses on practices from 30 years ago in a single region rather than the entire country. The group adds that non-regenerated areas are significantly lower today.
Thunder Bay is one step closer to having its own heart surgery center after a recent fundraiser exceeded its goal. The Regional Health Sciences Center raised over $70,000 to purchase equipment trays for cardiovascular procedures. That was well over the target of $40,000 for the one-day fundraiser on Giving Tuesday earlier this week. It's all part of a larger campaign to build a new cardiovascular center at the hospital. Jessica White is one of many patients who have had to travel to Toronto area for heart surgery.
It was scary, it was stressful, it was, all of those things, nervous to leave my family. My boys were so young at the time. How Jed, my husband, was going to manage with me gone for so long.
Our community wants to take care of our community, which is really, really nice. So we saw it in Giving Tuesday. We're seeing it as we're going through this campaign.
The hospital has raised over $12 of the $14 million it needs to start construction on the center, which is expected to serve 400 to 500 patients a year. The total cost is estimated at $60 million, with government kicking in the remainder. It will be several years before the center opens, but the hospital expects to begin some surgeries in existing operating rooms sooner than that.
The Toy Mountain Toy Drive at the Thunder Bay Wellness Center has gotten a big boost thanks to a kind-hearted donation from a young boy. For Chase Marabova's 6th birthday party, he told his mom he wanted to donate all of his presents and gift money to less fortunate children who may not be getting any presents over the holidays. With the help of his friends, Chase donated 3 large bags of toys as well as $90 in cash. Dr. Alan Cranton started Toy Mountain to help the Salvation Army, and last year over 200 toys were collected. For Chase, the reason for his decision was very simple.
They don't have a lot of toys.
Right, and how did you hear about Toy Mountain?
My mom told me, my dad.
Thank you very much. I love your sharing with all the other people and all the kids in Thunder Bay.
December 20th is the deadline to drop off donations at the Thunder Bay Wellness Center.
Grade 12 students from the city's St. Patrick's High School had a special delivery today for the George Jeffrey Children's Center. For the past week, students in Chris Opaski's religion class have been busy creating and stitching stuffed animals. This afternoon, they had the opportunity to deliver the 25 handcrafted stuffies to the Children's Center and tour the facility. Opaski's classes have a history of community involvement and says giving back is really what it's all about.
The whole point of this whole kind of experience for our kids to try and positively affect our neighboring community. And, you know, we got in touch with George Jeffries and originally kind of started with us just buying some stuffed animals. And then it kind of turned into, well, rather than buying them, why don't we try and make them?
I kind of learned that like helping people is really important, especially since like if you have things to give away, why not give them away for someone else's benefit, you know?
We're so pleased to see students and youth in our community take an interest in the center and what we do here. We're so thankful for all the time and effort and the handcrafting that went into creating these for the kids.
The stuffed animals will be handed out to children and families attending George Jeffries' annual Christmas party.
Well,